Hello, everyone. My name is Armando Molina Gómez. I'm a PhD student in the linguistics department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I'm also the current graduate assistant at the Kaipuleohone Digital Language Archive. Welcome to my talk, as told by the local voices, archiving a corpus of attitudes on Hawaiian language policy. The aim of this presentation is to briefly report on an archiving project of a legacy corpus. First, I will provide a background on the project and how the process has been conducted. Then I will give an overview of the corpus and the items that you can find in it. I will later present a storyline from a sample of items, and finally conclude by outlining the next steps of the project. So, the AS2 project is a thematic corpus that comprises 330 items, mostly newspaper clippings, on the topic of Hawaiian language policy. It is also a legacy corpus that was compiled by the late Dr. Albert Schütz between the 1980s and the 2010s. It has been worked on previously by students, well, now alumni, Dr. Danny Yarbrough, Eli Fessler, and Juniper Shield, and now myself. And eventually it will be archived in the Kaipuleohone Digital Language Archive. So, in order to understand why this collection is meaningful, we need to understand the context in which it was collected. As many of you already know, language shift in Hawaii has been ongoing for generations after the overthrow of the kingdom in 1893 and the decades of repressive language policies that ensued. However, in the 1970s, um, struggles for land rights sparked a period of cultural resurgence and native Hawaiian pride that was known as the Hawaiian Renaissance. In language, these efforts translated into milestones such as the 1978 Constitutional Convention, which recognized Hawaiian as co-official language, and the establishment in the 1980s of the first Punanaleo and the first Kulakayapuni language nest and immersion school, which later grew and have contributed to new generations of speakers of revitalized Hawaiians. So, given the time in which this corpus was compiled after the 1970s, we can see how it provides valuable insight into the changing language policy of Hawaiian language and the attitudes around language and these policies. Um, the process of cataloging consisted in signing labels and file names the to each of their items and labeling them with archival ink. Later, inputting the metadata in a spreadsheet that has been updated multiple times, and thirdly, scanning, which is a stage that is still ongoing. This is one example of the many newspaper clippings that we can find in the corpus, with Dr. Schütz annotation on the left margin, which mentions the newspaper name, Honolulu Star's Advertiser, and the date. However, filling out metadata has not always been so straightforward for all the items. This is an extract of the metadata spreadsheet. As we can see, there's a column for date begin and for date end. For most of the items, it was the same, but in some cases, um, like this newsletter that we can find on entry number 5, the we can find a date range. So we have the input was a beginner date and and date. For venue, most of the entries have the type of venue, which is most of the case a newspaper or a newsletter or a magazine, and then the name of said venue. But there are also but we also have exceptions like this personal communication, which is an essay from the 19th century, together with a transcription in modern Hawaiian spelling and an English translation. I believe this is the oldest item that we have in the corpus. So there's also a column for the language written in, and another one that marks whether it has been digitized yet or not. Other columns are the file names, which, as I said before, also appears in each physical item in archival ink. Notes from Dr. Schütz, notes uh, from us, and also a tax system that I will talk a little more in detail later. So some statistics on the corpus. We can see that um, most of the most of the items come from the date after the 1980s, specifically in the late 1990s. As we mentioned before, this this has been this was specifically at a time with many changes, and we see more call for Hawaiian studies in multiple institutions, as we can see also uh, more cultural initiatives in Hawaiian language. I forgot to mention that the first cohort of um, Kula Kayapuni students graduated in 1999. So we can see why this is the case. Distribution by venue, we can see that almost 80% of the items in this corpus come from newspapers, followed by magazines, newsletters, and communications, I which I conf which is a category in which includes letters, emails, and essays. And if we only count newspapers, magazines, and newsletters, we can see that there's even an even distribution between four four different newspapers: the Honolulu Advertiser, Honolulu Star Bulletin, the Honolulu Star Advertiser, uh, em- uh, emerged from the merger of the two latter newspapers, and Kaleo Hawaii, which is the campus newspaper of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. By language, we can see that this is a predominantly English-based corpus, and most of the few Hawaiian medium texts are personal communications and also columns in English, mostly medium periodicals, like the Kawakuka Kalahale column at Honolulu Star Advertiser. We also find two articles from all newspapers from the 19th century or early 20th century that can also be found at the Papakilo database. And as I mentioned before, I devised a system of thematic tags um, is in that is still in construction, but and which likely and will likely be revised in the future. But some of the topics that one can find in this corpus are topics relating to education, like mm, language nests, immersion schools, university, topics regarding linguistics, orthography and spelling, documentation projects, translation issues, domains of use of language, issues such as cultural appropriation, discrimination, sovereignty. I also included language ideologies such as purism, syncretism, English valorization as opposed to Hawaiian, and many others. I also started testing tone tags. For now, I also which only apply to specific items such as letters to the editor. For now, I only included um, these three tones: success, concern, and need. But since this is a work in progress, more tags will be added in the future, and this will hopefully contribute to projects on qualitative analysis of the corpus. Um, Due to time constraints, I won't be able to talk in detail about this topic, but before I finish, I would like to give an example of an interesting storyline told by some letters to the editor from Kaleo that we can find in the corpus from 1995 to 1996. So, in summary of this case, we have a number of letters from 1995 which defend the right of letters to the editors to be published in Hawaiian in this newspaper without without an English translation being provided. This was the policy of Kaleo at the time, but this sparked a whole debate on whether it should be necessary or why it is necessary. And in February 1996, the debate reignited when one letter to the editor insisted in the necessity for translations for everyone to understand. And I could talk about this issue more in details, but the summary is that Kaleo defines itself in these um, as asserting its policy as a bilingual space, but its readership confronts this reality and the understanding of what a bilingual platform should be. So not one in which provides translate which accepts letters in Hawaiian and publishes them with a translation in English, but one in which Hawaiian is understood as not needing translation. So the current policy in the 2020s is to not translate any Hawaiian language content that arrives. So it's even more interesting to observe this story in conversation to the present perspective. So what are next steps in the project? We can see that corp this so all items that are yet to be scanned will be scanned before the end of 2024, and the corpus will be made publicly available and Kaipuleohone. Some possible research avenues that we can explore are um, qualitative research projects on language ideologies and rhetorics, on language endangerment, after the Hawaiian Renaissance, maybe comparative work with Hawaiian language press that we can find in the Papakilo corpus, and maybe a larger exploration on how we can use corpora as a window to recent history in renormalization, especially in the current context of the International Decade of Indigenous Language. So these are my sources. And thank you so much for your attention. I remain I remain at your disposal for any questions or feedback. Thank you so much.